Bound for Glory by Lucius Shepard. Originally published in the October 1989 issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, republished in an anthology called Horror Story 3 in 1990, a collection of the author's stories called The Ends of the Earth in 1991, a German anthology in 1992, and the first issue of Crowded magazine in 2013. Read by Daryl T. Smith II for my channel Quasar Spectra. Bound for Glory. Tracy and I had boarded at White Eagle, which is the next to last stop before the train enters the Bad Patch, and we had bought tickets clear through to Glory, where I had some friends who still trusted me enough, or so I hoped, to front me alone. I has screwed things up proper in White Eagle, running my business into the ground and skating a thin line between plain failure and out-and-out fraud. And I'd known that Tracy was getting ready to make a move, and she was fed up with our life. I expect that was why I had risked the ride to Glory. The prospect of losing his only support has driven many a man to desperation. The wonder of it was, I realized that Tracy must have felt equally as desperate about her own prospects. Otherwise, she wouldn't have joined me. And I could not decide if this was a good thing or bad, that we were each other's last best hope. Somehow, we had managed to convince ourselves that the trip was a golden opportunity. But seeing the drawn faces of our fellow passengers brought home what a starve-out proposition it really was. Neither of us wanted to let on we felt this way, however, so we smiled and held hands and pretended to be full of spit and determination. Well, that was easy to do at first. The sun hung high in a notch between two mountains, gilding the snow and throwing indigo shadows from the firs, making a rare beauty out of the decline of day, and there was plenty of time to relax before we reached the Bad Patch, and the changes would begin. Following behind the conductor as he collected tickets was Roy Cole, who was an institution on the line. Cole was in his late 40s, raw-boned with salt and pepper hair and a seamed, tanned face whose dour expression was accentuated by a ridged scar that ran from the corner of his mouth along his jaw. He wore jeans and a loose black shirt, and cradled in his arms was a shotgun with silver filigree embellishing the stock. He stared at us as if searching for evidence of guilt, which was more or less the case. The train made the trip only when Cole felt conditions were right, and since he knew better than anyone else the changes that could occur and the signs to look for, no one objected to his scrutiny. If you were going to change, your best chance for survival was that Cole could protect you. But when he fixed those black eyes on mine, their pupils as oddly configured as chess pieces, it felt as if my skeleton were getting ready to jump out of my flesh and run for the door at the end of the car. I wanted to ask whether or not I was going to undergo a change, but before I could work up the courage, he had moved on and was examining yet another passenger. For the first hour, the ride was uneventful. Sunset was a sweep of burnt orange above the western peaks, with lavender and a sprinkle of stars higher up. The snow crystals in the air were fired and flurrying like swarms of live jewels, and the glow shined up the tumble of Tracy's black hair, put a gloss on the beauty of her face, which was something special under even ordinary light, with its fine bones and sad eyes, like the face of a troubled angel. And as we passed into the flat country, I felt that we had left the bad times behind and were alive only to the good parts of what had been. We talked some about our plans, but mostly we reminisced about our days in White Eagle, from the way we laughed and hugged each other. You might have thought we were newlyweds and not two losers on the run from fate. "Remember Gordon?" I asked Tracy. "That old boy rode a sorrel mare. You used to say he looked like he was always pouting. Well, back 'fore we got together, this tent show come to town." "Dr. Teague's medicine show," Tracy said, and I had replied, Yes, now I thought of it, I believe that had been its name. Anyway, I went on, they had these monkeys, chimpanzees, and the word was the owner would pay $50 to anyone who could whoop one of them. Well, sir, old Gordon considered himself a hell of a fighter. It wasn't just he thought he was good at it, he thought it was a noble pursuit. Once, I remember we were drunk. He got this faraway look and says to me, Ed, he says, you know, fighting ain't just rolling around in the dirt and getting bloody. It's the purest form of physical expression there is. Tracy giggled. So, thing was, when Gordon heard about the monkeys, about how they could whoop any man, he was first in line to give her a try. He felt he was upholding the pride of all mankind. I chuckled. Let me tell you, it was pitiful. There was this little pen with a dirt floor they fought in, and Gordon, he's bouncing up and down on the balls of his feet, throwing left jabs at the air, and the monkey, he's just squatting in the dirt, staring at Gordon like he never seen such a fool. Finally, Gordon gets frustrated about the monkey not doing nothing, so he steps up and wings a roundhouse right. I demonstrated, aiming for the monkey's head. That's all it took to get the monkey going, 'cause next you know, it's all over Gordon. I mean, it happened so damn fast it was a blur. 1 second the monkey's windmilling its arms at Gordon's chest, and a second later Gordon's lying face down, and the monkey's jumping up and down on his back and snatching out handfuls of his hair. "Oh, my God," said Tracy, laughing so hard she started to cough. "Gordon just wouldn't accept defeat," I went on. "After we got him patched up and he had a few drinks, he starts talking about it ain't fair a man's got to fight a beast without there being some kind of handicap imposed. A human being's bone structure, he said, wasn't as strong as a monkey's, and if he'd had some protection, well, it wouldn't have been no contest. He would have kicked the monkey's butt because his manner of fighting was scientifically superior. So, next day he goes to see Ben Krantz and gets him to carpenter up a helmet out of wood and leather that's got bars across the face and padding inside. Then he heads back down to the tent show and demands another crack at the monkey." I shook my head in dismay. This time, it was even worse. Starts out the same, with Gordon bouncing round and the monkey squatting and giving him this look that says, "Fool." Then, before Gordon can even throw a punch, the monkey jumps up, rips a helmet off Gordon's head, and goes to pounding on him with it, smashing the damn thing to pieces over his skull. We collapsed against one another, laughing. I don't suppose the story was all that amusing, but we needed laughter, and we milked the moment for every ounce. I was glad Tracy could manage it because, under the best of circumstances, she was not a happy woman. She had been raped by her daddy when she was just out of pigtails, and that had set her up for a string of disastrous relationships. She had told me more than once that I was the first man she'd been with who hadn't beat her, and I thought her feelings for me were less genuine attachment than relief. She had come to depend on men, in an unhealthy way, to use their mastery as an excuse for not striving to better herself. I guess she figured it was easier to let someone keep her down than to face up to what she was becoming. Or maybe it was just that men had made her feel like that. Though I liked to see myself as being an improvement for her, I knew that I was only the latest in a line of masters, that my uses of her, disguised as love, were crueler than bruises in their deceit, and would likely cause her more grief in the long run. Yet, knowing this hadn't persuaded me to let her go. I told myself that if I did, she would just find someone else to misuse her. And, too, there was something that I refused to admit to myself, that I enjoyed the dominance. While I had my charitable moments, I was at heart a taker, a wielder of power. The problem was that I had no power to wield except where Tracy was concerned, and I believe the most compelling reason that I clung to her was fear. But I was expert at denying that knowledge. My most successful form of denial was holding out the hope that beneath the layers of falsity, There was something real, an ember of love, or at least honest emotion, that, given a little wind to puff it alight and some kindling, would warm us for the rest of our lives. "Maybe," she said, coming up for air, "maybe the monkey's how come Gordon was always pouting." "Could be," I said. "It's for sure he never did get over it. He'd talk about the monkey like it was some sort of legendary hero, a great man whose like had never come our way again. He was a funny old boy, that Gordon." The train was pulling into Lorraine, a collection of shacks gathered round a couple of larger frame buildings, a hotel, and one that housed an assay office and a general store. Beyond the town, the terrain was rolling, snow-covered, with a few golden rectangles of winter wheat glowing in the decaying light, and beyond the wheat, beyond the spring hills, whose sheer granite faces showed slate blue, lay a dark haze that signaled the beginning of the patch. Seeing it sobered us, and we sat for a minute or two in silence. "We should get off," Tracy said dully. "Lorraine's far enough from White Eagle." "You know that ain't so," I told her. "'Sides, won't nobody here lend me money." "I could always go back to whoring." I was startled by the defeated tone in her voice. "You can't do that. Ain't much different than what I do with you." That angered me, and I refused to respond. "What's the point?" she said. "We go here, we go there, we're still the same people." I started to speak, but she cut me off. "And don't go saying you're going to turn over a new leaf. I can't remember how many times you promised." "I ain't the only one who's got bad habits they can't cure." That stopped her a moment. Like me, she knew our union was a comfortable trap, that its comforts were a guarantee nothing better would come along for either of us. "I still don't see the point," she said. "If we ain't going to do nothing different, what's the matter where we end up?" "Well, go on then," I said. "Go ahead, get off. You just go and be a whore in Lorraine if that's what you think's right, but I don't want to see it." She bowed her head, watched her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. I could tell the crisis had passed. "Why'd you want to come?" I asked. "You knew there'd be risk." "I reckon I thought taking a chance might be like magic or something, and we might come through it better off than we was. I know it sounds stupid." "Nah, it don't." She looked up at me. "Why do you want to do it?" "Pretty much the same reason," I lied. I pulled her into an embrace. Her hair smelled of lavender, and her breasts crushed against me. I touched them on the sly. They were firm and full, and just the thought of them would make me steamy. I felt the heat stirring in her by the way she arched against my hand. Then she drew back and pushed my hand away. Her eyes were filling. "What's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head, but I suspected she was thinking how pitiful it was that the good thing we made with our bodies had so little vital truth behind it, as if it were just a clever trick we could perform. The whistle sounded high and forlorn, and as the train lurched into motion, a fat woman in a black cloth coat with a fur collar half staggered, half dropped into the seat across the aisle. "Goodness," she said, and beamed at us. "That'n almost threw me back into Culver County, it did." She flounced about, settling the folds of her coat. She was wearing white gloves that made her hands appear tiny in contrast to the voluminous sleeves from which they emerged. And her feet, too, appeared tiny, like a child's feet stuck onto swollen ankles and bloated, black-stockinged calves. Her pasty chins trembled with the motion of the train. Eyes like currants stuck in the dough of her cheeks, and a cupid's bow of a mouth painted cherry red. Looking at her, I had the notion she was an immense pastry come to life, her veins filled not with blood but with custard cream. She leaned toward us, bringing with her a wave of cloying perfume, and said, "This your first trip, ain't it?"
I always can tell. Now, don't worry, it ain't so bad as you heard. I mean, it's bad, I won't deny that, but it's tolerable."
She heaved a sigh, causing the wrinkles in her coat to expand like a balloon plumping with gas.
"Know how many times I crossed?" "How many?"
said Tracy, and by the edge in her voice I knew she was put off by the fat woman.
32,
said the woman proudly.
"This'll make 33. I suspect you find that curious, but when you get my age," she tittered, "and you love cooking much as I do, and ain't no man in your life, you gotta find something to take your mind off the lonelies. Guess you might say traveling the patch is my hobby. When I started, I was kind of low. I didn't much care whether I made it to the far side or not, but it 'pears I'm immune to the changes like coal."
She hauled a leather-bound diary out of her purse.
"So I keep a record of the trips. I figure someday it might be valuable to some explorer or something."
She shook her head in wonderment.
"The things I seen, you just wouldn't believe it."
I was unsettled by the idea of anyone traveling through the sickness and dark of the patch for fun, but the look on Tracy's face was one of pure disgust. She turned to the window, wanting no part of the conversation. The lights came on inside the car, bathing us in a sickly yellow glow.
"It's a horrid place," the woman said. "But it's a mystery, and things that's mysterious, they got a beauty of their own. Course," she adopted a haughty expression, "it ain't the mystery to me it once was. I 'spect I know more about it than anybody, 'cept Cole."
I couldn't help being curious about her experiences. It would have been unnatural not to be after having lived near the patch for all those years. Like everybody else, I'd heard the stories of how it came to be, how Indian wizards had been warring, and stray magic had transformed a stretch of land that cut straight across the country, and how it had been fiery stuff falling from a comet that had done the trick, and how it was a section of hell surfaced from under the earth. The stories all differed on the origins of the patch, but were unanimous as to its nature. A place where everything changed, where things out of nightmares appeared, where time and possibility converged. I asked the woman what she knew concerning the beginnings of the patch, and she said, "This fella I know claims the patch is like that place out east where you can see 7 states from the top of a peak, 'cept it ain't states you see from the patch, it's worlds, hundreds of 'em, all packed in together. He claims that with all the pressures on the patch, it give way like how a dam will, and the worlds got all mixed together." I favored the story about Indian wizards, but I said, "Uh-huh."
"It don't really matter, though," said the woman. "Things is how they is, and knowing why they got that way don't change diddly."
Tracy was looking strained, and I decided to change the subject. "You been living in Lorraine a while, have you?" I asked the woman.
"I moved there once I started riding a train. Before that, I was over in Stedley for a number of years."
Stedley was a large silver mining community on the other side of the patch, and if I'd had a proper stake, that would have been my destination, and not glory. "Supposed to be world of opportunity in Stedley," I said.
"Yes, indeed. A body can make himself a fortune if he's got the will and the wherewithal. That where you headin'?"
"I got plenty of will," I told her, "but I'm a bit shy of the wherewithal. We bound for glory. I'm hoping I can get a stake there." She clucked her tongue in sympathy.
"Ain't that the way of it? When you get a bushel of taters, that's when you run out of stew meat."
She shot me a coy look.
"You know, I bet there's folks in Stedley who'd be willing to help out a young fella like yourself. God knows they'd do enough for the refugees."
"Refugees from the patch, you talking about?" She nodded.
"They pitiful devils, the ones that make it out."
"I hear there are a lot of trouble with refugees, on the train, I mean."
Lord, yes, ain't been a trip when some don't try and board. I don't want to hear about it, said Tracy, but the woman made a gesture of dismissal. Your man'll protect you, hun, she said. But them refugees, they can be fearsome, more'n fearsome. They can freeze your heart. Stop it, said Tracy, her voice tight. Yes, Lord, the woman's tone was exultant. When they come a-boiling through the doors, bringing all that foul air and magic with 'em, and it 'pears they grinning 'cause their lips is drawn back to show their teeth, they so desperate, and you can feel the power clawing at 'em. Stop it, Tracy shrilled. You must stop, you hear? Startled, I glanced at her. She was gaping at the woman, shivering, transfixed by some sight or feeling. Her cheeks were hollowed. Her eyes were as warm with crazy lights. They looked like broken glass scattered on black velvet. It was her eyes, as much as anything, that made me realize we must have entered the patch, that the changes had begun. Tracy, I said, confused, reluctant to touch her for fear I'd disrupt the tension that was holding her together. You can't help but feel it, the woman went on, showing her teeth in a manner redolent of the poor soul she'd just finished describing. It comes off 'em like the stink from an open grave. Sometimes their flesh just starts to sagging off their bones, and sometimes... Hey, I said to her, leave it be, will you? Won't be long now afore we see 'em, she said, pointing out at the smoky blue twilight and the snow. Sometimes their faces gets to glowing like dead fish bellies. Their teeth turn black and drop out, and they grow old right 'fore your eyes. They feel the strength ebbing from 'em, and they go to their knees and pluck at you with hands shrunk to skin and bones, and they beg for help in languages you can't understand. Devil languages. Their cheeks bulge and their gut strings come out of their mouths. They try and push 'em back in, but the stuff keeps on eeling out. Tracy was shouting, and the woman's face reddened and looked to be bloating, folding in on itself like a rotten apple. Her white-gloved hands gripped the armrest, and she spat out the words as if they were poisoned daggers. I pushed Tracy back and told the woman to shut up, but she only got louder, her imagery viler. The picture she conjured made me shrivel inside, and I was tempted to hit her. I think I might have, but then the door of the car opened, and Cole stepped in. He walked slowly down the aisle and stopped beside us, letting his shotgun angle down to cover the woman's breast. She stared wide-eyed at the double barrels and fell silent. "'Pears you having some trouble, Marie," he said in a voice like iron. "No," she said weakly. "No, I just—" "Why you getting all puffed up and red-faced?" he said. "Sure seems to me like you about to change. How you feel? A little shaky inside, like maybe something's shifting round in there?" He cocked one barrel, burning her with those weird black eyes, and she froze with her pouty red mouth open, one hand to her throat. A whistling guttering of breath came from her throat. "No, Cole," she said, putting real effort into sounding out the words. "I'm all right, I swear. You must can see that. You gotta know I'm—" "You fucking sow," Cole said. "I'm about sick to death of you scaring my passengers. You don't shut your hole, I promise you I'm just gonna assume you changing and blow your heart out through your damn spine. Ain't a soul who'd blame me for it." He pushed a shotgun into the pillowy softness of her breast and worked it about as if fitting it into a socket. "Don't you reckon I can get away with murder?" "Please, Cole," she whispered. "You gonna leave these good people alone?" Her eyelids fluttered down and she nodded. Cole made a disgusted noise, but he lowered the hammer.
His eyes swung toward me, the scar along his jaw bunched like a sidewinder. "Keep your gun in reach, friend," he said. "There's going to be trouble in this car. Do the best you able, and if I can get back to you, I will." Then he set out along the aisle. I went after him and caught up as he was about to enter the next car. "Tell me what's going on," I said, grabbing his arm. He nailed me with a fierce stare. "Take it easy, friend." "You don't advise a man to keep his gun handy without saying why." "I figured it was obvious why." He pulled me toward the door, away from the rest of the passengers. The window beside us was sanctioned into 4 narrow panes, and each one enclosed a rectangle of blue darkness with a single star low in the right-hand corner, like a block of mystical postage stamps. It was such a symmetrical configuration, so subtly improbable. It made me realize how at sea I was. "This gonna be a bad trip," Cole said. "I can't cover all the cars, so I'm leaving you in charge of this," and I was not eager for responsibility. "Why the hell you let him make the run when you knew things was going to be bad?" "Son, even if you could understand, I ain't got time to explain. Now, last time things was this bad, I lost me 9 passengers, so I'll leave it up to you. You want help, or you just want to watch it happen?" "Tracy," I said, "the woman with me, is she gonna be bad off?" "Sometimes the changes ain't so bad and you can get 'em through, but other times you gotta stop 'em. That's why I want you in charge here. Be better for everybody. You make that decision." I touched my holstered pistol. It felt as snug and dry as a snake in a skull. "No," I said. "No, I couldn't do nothing to her, and I ain't no good with a gun anyhow." "I'm gonna be busy," Cole said. "Whatever happens here, it's your call." I studied his weathered face, his strange eyes, wondering if he was telling me everything. He met my stare without any dodgery. The rattle and rush of the tram seemed to be registering the tension between us and all the violent acceleration of our lives. I had a strong sense of his character, and I saw that while the job had tied black twists in his soul, he was neither particularly good nor evil, neither courageous nor fearful, just a man who had reached a difficult pass that was half his own making and half the sorry luck that comes with being born. He was simply doing what he could to get along. Knowing that he was like me, a man with no special magic or destiny, gave me confidence in him and in myself. I'd never had to use my gun against another man, but now I thought I could. "What I gotta do?" I asked him. "There'll be refugees," he said. "Always is. They'll try and board a few hours from now at this place where the train slows on a steep grade. Don't ask no questions. If they get inside, just kill 'em. And don't waste your bullets." He inspected my gun belt. "See that squarehead back in the corner?" He indicated a middle-aged, gray-suited blond man with a brooding Scandinavian face and told me to keep an eye on him and on Tracy. The remaining 7 were an elderly woman in a green print dress and 6 dirt farmers, gloomy, roughly dressed men who had lost their holdings in a land grab and were hoping for a new start. "Anything else happens," Cole said, "you'll see it coming. The patch changes some for the worse, some hardly at all. Others like me and that fat bitch Marie and you, this trip anyway, it lets them see clear how bad things are for the rest. I don't know which way's more merciful. I come to see so damn much. I wish I was blind sometimes." He squared his shoulders and settled his shotgun under his arm. "Luck to you," he said. I paced along the aisle, dismayed by Tracy, who was gone into some kind of fugue, and what I saw out the train window made me fear for what I might see later inside the car. Once we passed a way station, an island of brilliance in the dark where sat a wooden building with a peaked roof and a peculiar bright white light stuck high on a pole above a loading platform. Ranked beside the platform were rows of human figures wrapped in gray cloth, like rows of mummies. Then we hurtled past a snowy street lined by round stone buildings with glowing signs floating above them, spelling out words in a script I could not read. Then there was a time when all I could see were thousands of lights ranging the darkness. We were traversing a smooth section of rail, and the noise of the wheels had dwindled to a rushing sound, and it was as if I were traveling on a schooner under a strong wind, sailing along a jeweled coast. More and more I came to regret my decision of risking the ride to glory. All my life, I had made the wrong or the too hasty decision, and while I had chalked this up to bad luck, now I understood it was a matter of weak character, or rather of a strong character half-formed, one whose strength was enough to utilize the power it had, but not strong enough to seize power for itself. As a result, I was always leaping from one fix to another, reacting to trouble like a scalded cat. And it struck me as odd that I hadn't seen it until now. Maybe, I thought, this was an instance of the clarity that Cole had said came to some who traveled through the patch, but most likely it was just that I'd reached the bottom of my possibilities, and all that was left me was to look back up and observe how I'd managed to fall so far. At first, I kept a close eye on the Swede and Tracy. Soon, though, I began to relax, thinking that Cole must have overstated the danger just to make me stay alert. But then the Swede came to his feet, clasping his hands to his head, moaning, a hideous noise that issued from the black O of his mouth like half a dozen voices all sounding the same tormented bass note. His fingers appeared unnaturally long, and to my horror, I realized they were growing longer yet, curving to encase the sides of his head like the bars of a birdcage. His face, too, was elongating, becoming a caricature of Swedish despondency. Glints in his eyes flickered like lantern flames. Talons were sprouting from his nails, and his white skin had pebbled like that of a lizard. Seeing this, my guts clenched, and I was too stunned to move. Screams, and the passengers began crawling over the seats toward the front of the car. One of the farmers, a red-faced, round-bellied fool in overalls, made a grab for the Swede as he staggered past, and the Swede raked him with his hooked fingers and tore the flesh off the side of his face. That shocked me from my funk, and I drew and fired. The gun felt alive in my hand, its kick like a natural muscular reaction, not the uncontrollable spasm that usually resulted when I took target practice. The bullet spread a fan of blood across the Swede's shirt and drove him back, but didn't knock him off his feet. But he came forward again, moaning in that demon voice. I punched out his left eye with one round, shattered his jaw with another. That dropped him to his knees, his features a mask of shattered bone and gore. I fed 3 more bullets into the chamber, and, half deafened by the reports, I emptied the gun into his head and belly. And that did it for him. His shirt had caught fire from the last round, pale flames leaping merrily, and his skin began to char. The blood flowing from his gut was purplish, darker than the rest. It congealed almost immediately, lumping up like gelatin. Gunfire came from the adjoining car. The passengers surged forward in a panic, but I forced them back and had a couple of farmers tie up Tracy, using a coil of rope that was part of their baggage. She made no objection, just stared out the window, refusing to answer when I asked her how she felt, or maybe she didn't hear. Her eyes were black as bullet holes. Muscles leaped in her jaw. It hurt me to see her trussed up, yet I was terrified of her. I kept picturing the Swede staggering along the aisle, spitting blood and fury. Marie caught my eye, and triumph in her expression. She began scribbling in her book. I wanted to kill her, but I didn't have the juice to act. The farmers dragged the bodies to the rear of the car as more gunfire came from up ahead. The train had slowed, chuffing up a steep grade. Out the window, I could see darkness, snow-laden pines, and stars aligned into unfamiliar constellations. Most of the passengers sat staring at their hands, praying or hoping for some mercy of the world to rain down. I gazed at Tracy, netted in rope, and didn't know whether the pain I felt was for her or for myself and the prospect of losing her. All the time we'd been together, I'd been able to persuade myself that I must love her some little bit anyway, that love was in me, buried under the topsoil of my character. Yet now I wondered what it was I'd been calling love. The comfort of sex, the security of having a shoulder to cry on, childish dependencies, strident needs and whining manipulations, and none of the generous emotions of a man. It seemed I could feel my life blow past me, like a train blowing past, somebody gawking from a weedy embankment. Just that. Life. Just a fast freight, a streak of darkness with a hot wind behind. And you barely saw what it was before it was by, and only too late did you understand all the different ways you could have fleshed it out, all the things you could have noticed and savored. And at the end, if you were lucky, you might know the measure of your failure. One of the farmers began muttering, and I caught the words, "God, I'd give anything." So would I have given anything, but in exchange for what? A fiercer determination, no conscience to weaken my desire. Those weren't the sort of things a good man was supposed to want. And even if I could get past the moral rule, they were things weighed out from the dross of experience, which you couldn't pick up in a trade like you could with a gun or a pair of boots. Maybe, I thought, you could decide to love. Maybe it was simply an act of will, one I'd never chosen to make. Well, I chose to make it now. And though I was more wishing than choosing, crossing my fingers and whistling in the dark, I swore I would try to protect Tracy beyond the limits with which I'd fenced in my heart. About halfway up the grade, I forced myself to examine her. She was smiling, a fixed, insane smile, and as I watched, a black trickle leaked from the corner of her mouth. She flicked out a long, slender tongue, crimson and rough, and licked it clean. Her skin had grown white, pulpy looking, and was rippling under her dress. When she flexed her fingers, straining at her bonds, they appeared either boneless or many-jointed. "Oh, Jesus," I said, backing away, and Marie squealed, "Kill her, for God's sakes!" I eased my gun out and held it with the muzzle up. The skin of my face thrummed, as if covering hot wires instead of muscle and bone. "She's all right," I said. One of the farmers, a heavy-set man with a shock of thick gray hair, wearing a threadbare corduroy jacket, said, "I can sympathize with you, but this ain't no time to be taking chances." I kept my eyes on Tracy, recalling her fire and stubbornness, the wild look she got when she wanted me. I didn't care then about any man. "You can die too, mister," I told the farmer. "Don't matter none to me." One of the others started to sneak up behind me. I whirled about and trained the gun on his face. "Come on," I said. "Take another step." Frustration turned to rage, and I yelled at them. "Just come on and see what I got for you. Come on now. What you waiting for?" They huddled together, anxious as horses scenting fire on the wind. The heavyset farmer said, "Calm down, buddy." I laughed at that and gestured toward the rear of the car. "Get on back there, and don't you even think about trying me." I herded them into the back with the bodies, then sat down across the aisle from Tracy. Her eyes had gone a blazing yellow. A membrane slid back and forth across them. The delicate lines bracketing her mouth, the finely etched crow's feet, all the lines of her face had deepened, blackened. It looked as if her face were a mask that was about to crack into pieces and fall away. "Tracy," I said, "you hear me?" She made a humming, growling noise in her throat. Her entire torso was rippling. The ropes were loosening. Her fingernails had turned dark blue, like death. Death's color, dark blue. I had a flash of memory. The sight of her body naked in dawn light. Rumpled sheets banked snowy round her, and her breasts gleaming in the soft curve of her belly, pure as the sweep of a spring meadow, planing down to the dark swatch of her secret hair. I felt dead inside, my thoughts like bitter smoke from a damped fire. I could feel the brimstone emptiness that the train was tunneling through, still grinding up the grade, and I wanted to throw back my head and howl. "Tracy!" I reached out to her, but couldn't bring myself to complete the gesture. Her skin, I thought, would be moist, her flesh a cold tumescence like the flesh of a tomato worm. The ropes were getting more slack by the second, and though it was agony to me, I knew it would be more merciful to shoot her now and not wait until she came after the passengers. But I couldn't do it. I glimpsed movement out of the corner of my eye. 2 farmers were creeping along the aisle. I put a bullet into the floorboards between the first one's legs, sending them darting back toward the group at the rear. "Next will be about 3 feet higher," I said. The elderly woman came forward, her hands outstretched.
"Don't let her hurt us," she said. "Please, stop her." "That's right," Marie squawked. In the panic, she had popped most of the buttons from her blouse. Her flaccid breasts bulged out from their lace armor, shaking like pudgy, sick animals. "You can't let her live." The farmers muttered their assent and shifted toward me. With their skins all pasty and yellow in the light, their gaping mouths and bugged eyes, they looked to have changed in some putrid fashion. And maybe they had, I thought. Maybe there are changes, and then there are changes. "Stay back," I warned them. It was just then that the rear door of the car blew open, a cold wind gusting along the aisle, and the refugees came in. There were 3 of them. Men, or almost men, wearing crudely sewn skins and furs. For a moment, everything was frozen. The refugees framed by the doorway, by the dark, and the suddenly intensified noise from the rails, and the passengers turned toward them. Apart from the cold, I felt a crawly sensation, a prickling along my spine, and I recalled what Marie had said about feeling the power that enlivened them. One was a hunchback with a heavy-jawed, brutish face, bulging prominences above the eyes, tufted brows, yellow teeth like an ape's. A second hid behind him. The third was a big man with gray skin and a strangely unfinished face, a gash of a mouth and black eyes that were almost perfectly round, like holes cut in a dirty sheet. His domed skull was bald, ringed with bony knots. I seemed to know something about him. I couldn't define it, but if I'd made a stab at it, I would have done so in terms of strength and intelligence and tenacity. He said something to me in a language whose words had the sound of a horse munching an apple. I thought it might be a question. I'm not sure why I didn't obey Cole's advice and shoot straight away. Maybe I had some hope for the big man. Maybe, at the bottom of my soul, I felt he had the right to live, and that I wasn't the one to be his judge and executioner. I began to think that his question had signaled a willingness to negotiate, that he wanted something from us, but I didn't know how to answer him. "Just get on out of here," I said, "and there won't be no trouble." He spoke again, the same words, but with a touch more intensity. He gave me a searching look, or so I took it, and meeting his eyes, I felt I had made a connection.
that what lay behind them was not necessarily alien. The farmer nearest him made a menacing move, and he held up a hand to still him. He spoke again the same words. I cocked my pistol and said forcefully, "Get oil out! That's your last warning!" The big man spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. I swear to God, I believe he smiled, though he might have been trying to frighten me by showing his filed teeth. But he spoke to the hunchback, who came toward me in a peculiar crabwise gait. Then 3 of the farmers charged the big man, and my choices dwindled to 1. My heart was empty of caring, of fear, and the gun leaped easily in my hand. The hunchback went sprawling halfway along the aisle with 4 bullets in him. I fumbled at my gun belt, trying to reload, as the big man knocked Marie to the floor, slung a farmer against the wall, and smashed another's face with a fist the size of a cannonball. He bent over Marie, who was groaning and heaving up onto her side. I finished reloading and fired. 3 rounds tore gouges in his head, but ricocheted off bone. I fired at his back. The bullet penetrated, but had no effect. "The throat! Aim for his throat!" somebody yelled as the man turned to me. Rills of blood flowed down his face from the head wounds, and as he was grimacing, crimsoned his teeth. I did as I'd been told, and the man sagged to his knees, clutching his throat. Dark blood spewed between his fingers. He tried to speak, his eyes pinning mine, still bright with regard, but he choked on his blood, pitched forward, and lay with one leg spasming. Smoke hung on the air like a misty trail winding through invisible mountains. The rattle of the wheels took on the rhythm of an enormous telegraph. My head ached, and my heart too. Sick with what I'd done, I cast about for the last man. Marie sat up, staring dazedly at the bodies and the blood rivering the floor. She had a discolored lump coming beneath her eye. The others were huddled in the back, but there was no sign of the 3rd refugee. Then a man called out, the same voice that had instructed me to aim for the throat. "Don't shoot," he said. "I won't hurt nobody." "Stand up," I said, aiming at the seat from behind which I believed the voice had come, one about 3/4 toward the back of the car. "I swear I won't hurt nobody. Didn't I help you? Don't that prove I'm on your side?" The elderly woman, her bonnet speckled with blood, lifted her arm and pointed back of the seat at which I was aiming. "There he is," she said, her voice quavering. There he is." "For Christ's sake," said the man, his words coming in a torrent. "Don't you understand? I'm on your side. The others, they were crazy. This is their home now, this hell. They just wanted to get on board and hurt you. But me, I'm hardly changed at all. I never wanted to hurt you. I went along with the others just so I could get onto the train. I was always planning to turn on them. Please, I just want to live." During his spiel, I had become entranced by the bodies, the smell of gunpowder, the blood, the smoky yellow air. And I was astonished to recall my lack of fear, the ease with which I'd handled the gun with which I'd killed, all completely out of character. I wondered if I'd look into the mirror and see black eyes like coals looking back at me, the pupils with the shapes of pentagrams. I wanted to be my old, flawed, cowardly self again. "Stand up," I told the man. "Keep your hands high and don't make no funny moves. I won't shoot." After a second, he complied. He was a puny little thing, several inches short of 5 feet, with a shaggy head of gray and black hair, and a pinched face the color of an old pumpkin that had as many wrinkles as an apricot seed. I assumed him to be old, but then I saw that his hands were those of a young man, that his neck wasn't crepey, but firmly fleshed, and I also saw that what I had taken for wrinkles were actually ropey veins darker than the rest of his skin, and that his face was that of someone my own age. What would he do, I wondered, looking like that out in the world? "Don't trust him," said the farmer, and Marie added,
"You can't tell about 'em. Even the innocent-looking ones can be dangerous."
I didn't trust him. He had turned on his companions, and desperate or not, monstrous though they had been, it was nonetheless a betrayal. And besides, I wasn't sure I believed him about the big man wanting to hurt us. "What's your name?" I asked him.
"Jesus," he said in a choked voice. "It's been so long since anybody asked me my name. I've been living with them animals, pretending to be one of them." He gathered himself. "Name's Jimmy Crisp. I was a rancher over in Glory till this bastard stole my land, tied me up, and put me on a handcar, sent me rolling into the patch. It's been 6 years. 6 goddamn years." A couple of the farmers urged me to shoot him, and I told them to be quiet. Then Marie's jaw dropped, and she took a backward step, staring at something behind me. The others, too, reacted, and I spun about in time to see something slender leap across the aisle and vanish behind a seat. I blew a hole in the seat and heard a thin, pining cry, bird-like, yet more piercing than that of any bird I knew. And it was by that cry I realized that I had fired at Tracy. It gave voice to all the pain and frustration I'd sensed in her ever since we had met. I fired a second round at the seat, not wanting to see how she had changed. The next moment, as the cry sounded once more, drilling through me, somebody grabbed my arm and prevented a third shot. Jimmy Crisp. The passengers were yelling at me to shoot, but Crisp, his horribly wizened face looking up close more than ever like a piece of rotten fruit, said, "She ain't gonna do you no harm. She changing into this kind of animal what lives in the woods and don't never come round people. They peaceful. They just want to be left alone." It seemed strange that he would forget his own peril and go to the defense of an animal. I had the idea he was trying to make up for something. The others kept up their yammering, Marie loudest of all, urging me to do my duty. My duty. I hadn't asked for the job, and I had nothing but disgust for them. I was about to tell them something along those lines, but Crisp beat me to the punch. "You stupid bastards. You want to kill everything you see coming out of the patch. Stop 'em like you would a bug. But know who you're killing for the most part? People who was family to some. Friends, sisters, cousins, folks who's foolish like you or sinned against like me. Ain't no life out there, not for a man. But it's a life, all the same. And you got no call to deny it to something ain't trying to hurt you. Something that's only got that much life left." His speech had affected the passengers. But then the thing behind the seat, I couldn't think of it as Tracy, set up a mewling, and they chimed in again with their demands. Marie came a step toward us. "You don't finish her, Cole will."
When I made no response, she started down the aisle.
"I'm going to get Cole."
I trained the gun on her dumpling gut, cocked it. "Hell you are." In the sickly light, her doughy face with its sour expression and bruised cheekbone resembling something I might have dreamed of after a heavy meal and too much brandy, less human in its revolting stamp than even Crisp's face. She stared at me, her lips pursed, her eyes squinting, and then she began to scream, "Help! He's killing us! Help us, Cole!" A scrabbling noise behind me. The animal thing was leaping about, moving with the sinuous speed of a ferret, clawing the windows, apparently terrified by Marie's screams. Through rips in Tracy's dress, I saw that its body was not soft, but all whipcord muscle. The skin had darkened to a midnight blue. The face, too, had darkened, though not as much as the rest, and it had simplified. the features acquiring a cast that was somehow both feline and reptilian, the mouth thinner, wider, and a nose a pair of curved slits, but the eyes huge and yellow, translucent membranes like lenses of crystal. They carried the sadness I'd heard in that cry. And in the lineaments of the face, minimal though they were, I could still see Tracy's troubled beauty. It was awful to detect her essence in that creature. Weakness flooded me. My gun hand trembled. I wanted to work some magic and call her back to the human. Yet, at the same time, I wanted to release her, and I had the thought that this might be the best she could have hoped for. Not to have failed with me again, but to have changed utterly, to have gone beyond herself into a world where failure or success would be a simple affair, with simple joys, simple pains, and something wholly of her own making. Maybe I was trying to justify my mistake in having brought her along, but I could not dismiss the idea. The screams had stopped. Glancing behind me, I found that Marie had fallen into one of the seats, a new lump rising above her left eye. Crisp was standing over her, spewing curses. The farmers were keeping their distance. I swung back to the animal. It turned toward me and let out a feral hiss. I knew that if it couldn't escape soon, it might decide that attacking us was its only hope of survival, and then I would have to kill it. The train was losing steam, having reached the steepest portion of the grade, and I went to a window, preparing to bust it out with the butt of my pistol, thinking that I could persuade the animal to jump through the hole I made. But as I drew back my arm, the door opened and Cole came in, looking harrowed, his black shirt ripped. He brought his shotgun up to fire at the animal, and I trained my gun on his chest. "You shoot her. You dead," I said, trying to make my stare into a hard beam he could feel from 20 feet away. "Don't be crazy, friend. She ain't nothing to you no more. And far as shooting goes, 'pears we got us a Mexican standoff. All I care about's I got you. So, if you ready to die..." "Oh, I'm ready. I've been ready for years. How about you?" I noticed the muscles in his neck and shoulders were tightening. He was preparing to make a move. I had the idea I could smell ozone in the air, in the bad yellow light. Or maybe it was the coppery scent of blood drying on the floor. "Put the gun down," I said. "Put it down right now." "Listen, son," he said, his tone even and easy. "I'm giving you a chance 'cause you done me a service. Ain't nothing left of your woman, and all you doing is making things worse for everybody, her included." Cole was blind. I understood that now. He had been too long on the job. He was operating upon judgments made years before and was incapable of weighing the case before him. In the seams and wrinkles of his worn face was written a language of stubborn and unyielding principle. He had, as he himself had said, seen too much to want to see more, and so he had stopped seeing anything that demanded new judgments. But my vision was clear, my focus sharp. I could see those eerie pupils contracting, their shapes changing like the spots on a magical deck of cards, going hearts to spades, to a shape more ominous than the previous one, and I knew that he was going to take me out, that he figured it was his only chance. "Oh, shit," I said. "Refugees." His head jerked to the side, and I dropped my aim a hair and fired. The bullet caught his hip and threw him back against the wall. The shotgun discharged into the ceiling, and the animal thing bolted for the door, flowed through it, and was gone. I ran after it and stood between the cars. As I've said, the train was barely moving, and so I had a good long view of what I'd learned to love too late running away from me. The land sloped sharply from the tracks, a decline of hummocky moonlit snow given out into evergreen forest halfway down, and beyond lay a plain that stretched to the horizon. Such a place, that plain, as you might envision after chewing some of those cactus buds that Indians sell in the Mexican markets. Darkly iridescent points of land hooking out into water that had the dull gleam of tarnished silver. A great river of it feeding through a country of virgin timber and solitary habitations. Nodes of fiery color lodged in the vast, gloomy sweep of the heart of the patch. Fountains of light spraying up from nowhere and vanishing. Wild stars and pale enormities of cloud. A sky of such complex immensity that it seemed an entity unto itself, the embodiment of a profound emotion. Areas of shadow where witchy glows flickered. Islands of phosphorescence, effloresced and faded in the farthest reaches like universes being born. Shadows with no source passed across the surface of the water. Lightnings touched the earth and spread glittering tides across it. It was lovely and evil, foul and serene, intimate and deadly. There was no end to its mysterious detail, its potential for change, and running across the snow toward all that majestic confusion and silent tumult was Tracy. I had come to accept it as being her because I had given up on her, let her go, and also because I understood that the patch wasn't the hell I had imagined, that while it might be inimical and repulsive to me, for others more alive than I, it was the only home possible, and held out an opportunity for rewards that my world couldn't offer. Good and evil were more sharply defined there, and there was a grandeur in the freedom and wildness of the place, in the endless reach of the solitudes, in the feeling that whatever fate was yours, it was worked out from your deeds, not a weakness bred into you and enforced by lies. I'd felt something of that freedom and wildness in the gray-skinned man I had killed, though at the time I wouldn't have been able to put it into words. For certain, I had known that he needed something more than our lives, something he hadn't been able to communicate, and had not trusted me to understand. And, in truth, I could not have understood. But now, seeing more clearly than I ever had, I believed we might have made a compact, established a bond that would have prevented the deaths. And what about Crisp and the refugees who wandered back to the world? Half-changed men unsuited for life in either place, incompatible with any of the worlds. That, I knew, was the case. Crisp had hinted at that in his defense of Tracy, and he must have felt it in his bones. I was probably like that, I thought. Born too much for one place, too little for the other. Wrong by an inch for happiness, or not happiness. I didn't believe in that any longer. For strength, for constancy. As I contemplated all this, I watched that lean figure growing smaller and smaller, darkening against the snow, sort of like watching a hole being burned in white paper by a match held behind it, except in reverse, the hole dwindling and finally closing. It wasn't until after she had disappeared into the shadows of the trees that I felt her loss, and it was not the tearing pain I might have expected. What I felt was softer than that, expressed more precisely by the Mex word for pain, dolor, which implies a drooping head, a sweet fall of darkness over the heart, a luminous ache that can light the gloom it creates. I understood from this that I'd lost Tracy long ago, and that only this minute had I begun to miss her. At last, shivering from the cold, I went back inside. My bullet had ripped a furrow in Cole's hip, yet had done no serious damage. The elderly lady had bandaged him, and he was sitting on the floor. His color was a bit off, but otherwise he appeared sound. He had a quart of Emerson's bourbon in hand. He glanced up at me and shook his head ruefully. "You a pure damn fool," he said without malice, mildly, just making an observation. "But you got stones. I give you that." I flopped down next to him. "You were wrong to want to shoot her. Dead wrong. You should have seen that." He was not, I realized, interested in the subject. I should lock you away, he said. Maybe that'd smarten you up.
I'll testify against him, said Marie. You can count on that, Cole.
She was back in her seat. They were all sitting, the farmers, the elderly lady, all in the same attitudes that they'd exhibited at the beginning of the trip. Nothing might have happened. Only Crisp, who was rocking back and forth in his seat, his grotesque face buried in his hands, showed any sign of having gone through a bad time. He was talking to himself, agitated words that I couldn't make out. From time to time, he stomped his foot and slammed a fist into his thigh, as if punishing himself. I didn't have either the energy or the right pitch to console him.
You don't bring the charges,
Marie said to Cole, primping herself in a hand mirror, dabbing powder onto her bruises.
Then I will. I ain't about to have my person assaulted way it's been on this trip.
Just be quiet, Marie, Cole said wearily. He shifted and winced. Sorry about that. I nodded at his hip. He made an amused noise. I've had worse. It'll mend. I'm amazed, I told him. If I'd known people took getting shot as good as you, I'd have shot a lot more people in my time. He grunted with amusement. That's how it goes. Sometimes you bite the tiger. Sometimes the tiger bites you. Well, there's that, I said. Marie stared at us, dumbfounded.
You ain't gonna just forget it, are you, Cole? He's committed a blood crime.
I'll study on it, said Cole. But tell you the truth, putting this boy away ain't gonna cure nothing, and I was thinking I could use him on the line. I don't think I'm up to it, I said. Anyway, that's your bad fortune, not mine. He gave me an appraising look. Maybe you're right. Now I consider it, you probably won't be so lucky with the changes. You come back to the patch. We had reached the top of the grade and started down, picking up speed with every second. I gazed out the window at the sweep of the plain, the shining waters and dark curves of land. It seemed to me that the whole expanse formed a single fabulous image, like a character in some ancient script or a symbol on a treasure map. And there must be treasure out there, I thought. There must be a million sights worth seeing, a million times worth having. I imagined Tracy somewhere in it, asleep in its shadows, her old life receded to a dream.
I can't believe this, said Marie. He puts a bullet into you and you saying you'd offer him a job.
Cole winked at me. You can pick your nose, Marie, not your friends.
The man almost got us killed. I ain't gonna stand by and see him get off scot-free.
With an inarticulate yell, Crisp sprang to his feet. He turned this way and that, as if unsure of whom he wanted to address. There's this place in the patch, he said, emoting like a preacher. This one place so bad can't nothing but the worst of 'em stand it. The ones who's monsters, who sleep on raw meat and shit their babies. It makes hell look like Sunday school. Fire don't warm you there. It just casts shadows and hurts your eyes. The snow's white insects. The rain's transparent razors. He scurried up behind Marie, whipped a hunting knife out from his sleeve, and put the edge to her throat. And I'm taking you there, pig. I'm taking you right there, 'cause that's where you fucking belong. He hauled her to her feet and stared wild-eyed at me. Don't you try and stop me. I'll bleed her here and now. I regarded him wearily, much as I would have loved to see Marie dragged out into the patch. Oddly enough, it wasn't in me to let Crisp do it. Sit down, I told him. You ain't doing no good by this. Marie's eyes rolled down, trying to see the knife. I came to my feet and Crisp nicked her. She squeaked and went stiff. Get back, he warned me. I ain't going to interfere, man, I said. "I just want to ask you a couple of questions, all right?" That unnerved him, but he said, "Yeah, sure. The man you come aboard with wanted to hurt us, but that big fella, he was asking me something. I mean, he didn't just come through the door and start breaking bones. What was he asking?" "I don't know. Thought you said you was pretending to be one of them. You must know the language he was talking in." He opened his mouth, closed it, obviously flustered. "Then I was thinking about this woman you got there," I said. "About why she's so mean. Way I figure she's just scared of who she is, hating herself 'cause she's fat and useless and don't belong nowhere. All she got to do is to ride back and forth on this damn train. She can't hate herself enough to satisfy, so she takes it out on other people. She don't really want to hurt us. She just ain't got the guts to hurt herself. See what I'm saying?" "You talking crazy." Crisp looked to the others as if for confirmation. "What you trying to do?" "Now you come on board with these other two and you turn on 'em. You tell us you was always planning to turn on 'em. That you was just playing 'em all along with 'em. They was going to hurt us, you say. But be that as it may, you weren't square with 'em, 'cause you was afraid." "What'd you want me to do? Let 'em kill you?" "You would have done anything to get out of the patch. You weren't like them others, don't matter what they were. You just weren't one of 'em. You didn't think you belonged with 'em. You were too scared to think about anything except that. But once you was shut of 'em, alone with us, it was the same exact situation. You were scared of us. You felt you didn't belong. You could feel that this wasn't your answer either, that you was as wrong here as you was in the patch. But still, you had to make us believe you were one of us, so you went on about how you'd helped us, how you'd betrayed the ones you boarded with to save our lives. Like you said, just playing along." "No," said Crisp. "No, that ain't it." "Of course, then you started hating yourself 'cause you betrayed 'em, and 'cause you couldn't hate yourself enough to satisfy, you picked out Marie here to hate. Now, I admit she's easy to hate, but when you get right down to it, what she been doing ain't no different than what you doing now, is it?" The tension was draining from Crisp. He looked hopeless, beaten. "Don't you see?" I asked him. "Ain't nowhere in this world you gonna feel at home. And sticking some pathetic woman what's the same as you just gonna make things worse." "Leave me be." What was the big man asking? "Nothing. I don't know." What was he asking? Crisp shouted, "I don't know." What did he want? Food? Is that it? Medicine? Fuel? He gave his head a violent shake as if trying to dislodge something inside it. It appeared that he couldn't decide whether to smile at me or snarl. That rotted jack-o'-lantern head wobbled like it was about to fall off his neck. "You don't have to tell me," I said. "I don't know what he wanted, but I do know it wasn't blood." Crisp let out a moan, a terrible sound full of loathing and pain. "Our help's what he wanted," I said. He wasn't hoping too much, but he was willing to chance asking me a question just in case I'd be smart enough to understand it. The little man shoved Marie down and faced me with the knife, swaying with the erratic motion of the train, his face working. I said calmly, carefully, "That ain't going to do it for you either." He jabbed at me with the knife, a warning, but in his face was the rumpled, unsteady look of death. As I'd been earlier, he was past caring. "Whatever you done," I said, "ain't no worse than things we every one of us done. We all a patchwork of good and bad. You maybe did wrong with your companions, but you saved a life once you got on board. Nobody here's going to fault you, but you can't go around hurting people to make yourself feel better. You think about that a minute." He seemed to be obeying my instruction, thinking things over, but I guess there was just too much wrongness in his head, too much trouble in his past, for thought to make much sense. I had relaxed a bit, expecting him to see reason, and when he came at me quicker than I would have believed possible, I wasn't ready and took a slice on my forearm. I gritted my teeth against the pain and tried to grab him, but he ducked and darted past me out the door. He stood between the cars, a shadowy figure hanging onto the safety rail. The train was rocketing along now, and I understood what he intended and that he had no chance. But he was no longer my responsibility, and so I only watched and waited. He hesitated and glanced back into the car, and I could feel his yearning, the weight of his anguish, all the shattering displacement of what he'd hoped being flooded by what he knew. Then he swung out over the rail and vanished into the black rush of the night. If he cried out, it was lost in the thunder of our passage. Dispirited, I sat back down beside Cole, ignoring the gabble from the rear of the car. Marie sobbing, the farmers all talking at once. "You didn't handle that one too good." Cole passed me the bourbon. I had a slug and began wrapping my arm with a bandana. "About as good as you handled me," I told him. We were moving down into the deep forest, and all I could make out of the great plain through the ragged silhouettes of the evergreens were intermittent glints of silvery water and unearthly fire. I finished wrapping my arm, had some more bourbon, and leaned back. "Are we all right now?" I asked. "Are we past having more trouble?" Cole said, "Most likely," and reclaimed his bourbon. After a while, he asked me what I planned to do now that everything had changed for me. I laughed. "I'm still bound for glory." He made a non-committal noise and drank. "That's one hell of a ride," I said. "Hell of a ride." I gazed off along the car, at the dried blood and the farmers, at Marie, huge and depressed, muffled in her coat. Despite everything, I couldn't work up hate for her. All my emotions had been fired, leaving me with a cylinder full of empty chambers. A shudder went through me, not of cold, but some last residue voiding itself, a dry heave of the spirit. Tracy, I thought. And then even that was gone. "What's there to do after this?" I asked. "What's left?" "Turn around and go back the other way was all I could ever figure," Cole said. I took a room in Glory. It was a tiny, crooked room with a slanted ceiling and leaning walls, cold as a penny. From the window I could see ramshackle buildings and rutted dirt streets marbled with crusts of snow. By day, buckboards slotted along the ruts. Women in wool shawls and long skirts hustled past. Men loaded and unloaded kegs and nails and bales of straw and grain sacks and stopped into the saloons for a drink. Kids chased each other, ducking under horses and wagons and pelting each other with snowballs. Nights, there was some wildness, tinny piano music, gunshots, female shrieks, but not so much as there had been in White Eagle. As far as I could tell from being there a few days, every town I'd ever known ought to have been named Glory, because they were all of them the same. There were refugees, of course. They slept in alleys and doorways, wherever it was dark and there was a chance of making it through the night without being beaten. None of the citizens wanted them around, what with their peculiar habits and deformities. They were tolerated due to some sort of Christian twitch. I would sit by my window and watch them slink about and wonder if I wasn't one myself. I hadn't bothered looking up my friends to borrow money. That was a plan I'd made with Tracy. Even if she had been there, I doubt I could have stuck to it. I had changed, and few of my old possessions had any meaning. Instead, I got a job swamping out a saloon, which paid enough for food and shelter, and occasionally to bring a woman up to my crooked room. The women made me happy, but not for long. Once they were gone, I would go stand in the dark and spy on life. I saw 1,000 things I wanted, yet nothing I wanted enough to seize, to just grab and have a bite and laugh with the joy of fulfilled desire. I was as empty as I'd been at the beginning of the ride from White Eagle and at its end. And when I looked into mirrors, I saw a man on the run from himself, growing sick and weak again. Spring faded, summer died, fall ebbed. I won a horse in a poker game, a shit-brown, sore-kneed, mean-tempered animal that I kept only because I was in no position to throw anything away. I hated that horse, and I would have just as soon gotten cozy with a skunk than put a saddle on him. But one morning, I realized I'd grown so sick of myself that I couldn't stand my room any longer. It reeked of my hangovers, my sodden incapacity. I packed a bedroll, mounted up, and headed east for Steadley, again thinking what I needed was a new place, a new start. But the ride came to be its own thing. The air so crisp it flowed into my lungs like cool fire. The sky, that potent blue you find only on the backside of creation, with snow peaks ahead and to the north. I'd intended to do some soul searching, to try and gain perspective, but it appeared that by simply leaving glory, I had gained sufficient perspective, and I experienced sweeps of emotion that in their purity seemed to embody the perfection of the sky, the shining mountains, and the momentum of the land, the great flow of it eastward, rising and declining with the smoothness of deep ocean swells. My body felt clean, my head empty of worries. Even the horse's temper had improved. A day and a half later, when Steadley heaved into view, a gaggle of weathered frame buildings that differed from Glory only by its greater size and the profusion of its squalor, I was not yet ready to end my ride, and I figured I would keep going a while and pitch camp in the hills east of town. Weather closed in, the sky grayed, and fat white flakes started to fall. But when I reached the hills, I was still eager to continue, and as the light faded toward dusk, I told myself I'd ride a few miles more, close, yet not too close, to the edge of the patch. I moved into evergreen forest, following the railroad tracks, which were banked high with snow that had fallen the previous week, finding peace among the dark trees. Tiny birds with white bellies and black caps were hopping thick as fleas beneath them. In their nervous agitation, they reminded me of how my thoughts had been working recently. Wind whirled up fresh powder from the snow crust, stretched it out into veils that went flowing across the banks and glittered for a moment before dissipating. The heavy, snow-laden boughs of the firs barely trembled. I was preparing to scout about for a campsite when I heard the train from Steadley coming and spotted its smoke unwinding above the treetops. A minute later, I saw a locomotive round a bend, sparks fluming from its smokestack, a gigantic black beast out of hell, its brass-trimmed cowcatcher looking like golden teeth in the decaying light. It was on an upgrade, moving at a relatively slow pace, and I urged the horse onto a trot alongside, looking in the windows, studying the frightened faces of the passengers. As the end of the car passed, a man with a shotgun leaned out between cars and shouted for me to keep away. Cole. Even at that distance, I had a clear impression of his eyes, a sense of their bizarre black configurations. "Hey, Cole," I called out. "Don't you recognize me?" He peered at me, leaning farther out, hanging onto the safety rail. "Ain't you the boy that put a hole in my hip?" I waved. "How you been?" "Tolerable. And you?" "Shit. I'm doing fine as a man can do." And, oddly enough, I believed it. "Where the hell you think you going?" Cole shouted as the train began to pick up speed. "We 'bout into the patch." "Well, that's where I'm going." His warning didn't affect me, or not the way I would have expected anyway. I felt challenged, excited, alive. I urged the horse into a gallop, plunging through the snow, and was astounded by the ease with which he responded. "You crazy. Don't you remember what I said? The change is gonna be different for you this time." I laughed. "Don't tell me you ain't never wanted to go out into it to find what's there. You can't see it without feeling that way." He nodded. "Oh, yeah, I've had that feeling a time or two." "Then come on with me." I spurred the horse faster. "We'd make a pair, two of us. We could scare monsters into hiding and steal the princess from the tower, we could." He just looked at me and grinned. "Come on," I yelled. "What you got to lose? We'll crown ourselves king of the goddamn place. Come on with me." And I believed that too, that we could see all of the wonders and intricacies of the patch, its violent lights and darks, and come through victorious. I was heady with that knowledge. A plume of smoke from the engine swirled between us, and after it had passed, he called, "Now that's your bad fortune, not mine." The train was pulling away from me, heading for another curve, and as the train began to angle round it, Cole yelled, "Luck to you." "Shit, I don't need luck," I told him. "I got a special moon watches over me. I'm part of an infinite design. I got more fire in me than that old engine of yours. What do I need with luck?" "Take it anyway," he cried, waving his shotgun, and then the car jolted round a bend and I saw him no more. I had thought all my brave words were bluster, that once he had gone out of sight, I would rein in the horse and find myself a campsite, but I kept urging the horse to run faster. And it was not just my urging that commanded us, because I noticed then that the horse had changed, become a force of its own, a great dark engine with a steaming heart that pulled me along and helped me abide by a decision that I realized I had already made, that I'd made long before I left Glory. I recalled watching Tracy run for the cover of the woods, how I'd thought of her as running away from danger, but seeing her in my mind's eye, I understood that she'd been running for joy, for life, fueled by all the brilliant thoughtfulness that was empowering me now. That was it, you see. There was no logic to my act, no sense, no plan, no self-manipulation. I was free of all that, free of fetters I'd never known existed, of impediments so subtle in their hold that I couldn't even name 'em. And I was running as I had not since I had been a boy, for the pure muscular exhilaration, knowing nothing but an intoxicating sense of freedom, the wind of fire at my back, and the snow blowing up into phantoms, and the dark trees like fortress towers, and the world a richness of absolutes. It might be I was running toward death, but that prospect held no terror for me. I had come from a death far worse than any toward which I might be going, a palsy of trepidation and perverted dreams that had been snuffing out my soul. And even if I were to die that minute, I'd be better off for having taken this chance. Death was waiting somewhere. No doubt about it, but I was finished with sniffling and whining, trying to beat it by dodges and deceits, trying to work angles and cover all my bets, softening the blows of life by burrowing beneath the skirts of an unhappy woman. To my amazement, we had begun to catch up with the train. That horse of mine was a marvel, each stride carrying us an improbable distance. I could not see its face, but I knew the measure of its change, its eyes aglow like miners' lanterns, its teeth sharp and capable of tearing, its hooves driving sparks from the stones. And I felt as well the measure of my own change. It wasn't what I might have picked had I had a choice, but it was true to myself in a way to which I'd never admitted. My heart was a furious cell, my mind thick with outlaw desires, my hands fit for loving and killing and little in between. I spurred the horse, and we went coursing past the last car. I matched the train's pace and gazed through the window at a pretty woman in a dark blue dress. I stared at her breasts, my mouth watering, and wanted her with a sudden blaze of passion that came near to unseating me. She drew back, pale and frightened, a hand to her mouth. God knows what face I'd now presented to the world. I laughed, a howl that made accord with the howling wind. There was an evil joy in the laugh that, had I heard it at any other time, would have made my spit dry and my balls shrivel up into seeds. Now I loved to hear it, knowing it for the signal music of my new life. I considered swinging onto the car and taking the woman, but she offered nothing I could not find in more satisfying form upon the vast and glowing plain that lay to the north. And so I reined the horse in that direction, swerving down through the evergreens, smashing aside the boughs with my strong right hand, and sending up a cloud of snow behind, bound at last for glory, the only kind accessible to those who have failed at ordinary grace, bound for the end of limits and the final places of love and power, and all the blooded dreams and mysteries beyond. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.